RCMP has finally confirmed it. The exact movements of Daniel Martel in the hours before Lilly and Jack Sullivan vanished, and it's far more disturbing than anyone imagined. For months, the public has been asking the same questions. Where was Daniel? What was he doing in those crucial hours? And more importantly, why do so many pieces of his story still not add up? Now, investigators have pieced together a minute-by-minute timeline. And within that timeline lies a chilling silence, a missing 45 minutes, and contradictions so severe they could shatter everything the public has been told about this case. It all begins just before noon on May 7th. At 12:15 p.m., Daniel Martel's phone suddenly goes dark. No calls, no texts, no location data. For nearly an hour, he becomes a ghost in the digital world. Investigators now say this blackout period, from 12:15 to 1:03 p.m., could be the dark heart of the case. Because when his phone finally reconnects, it doesn't ping anywhere near a busy street, a family home, or even a familiar route. Instead, the signal emerges near a wooded area just a short drive from the Sullivan residence, a place that locals describe as isolated, quiet, and unsettling. At 1:03 p.m., Daniel's phone comes back online, but within minutes his movements grow even more confusing. By 1:12 p.m., data shows him circling back toward the Sullivan home. At this same moment, witnesses report seeing a man, matching Daniel's description, pacing near the edge of the property. One local described his behavior as restless, like he was waiting for something or someone. Then comes the most disturbing twist. Between 1:20 and 2 p.m., Daniel's vehicle is spotted on multiple cameras. Some cameras place him closer to the town center, others closer to a back road near the river. The problem? These routes don't line up with the explanation he later gave investigators. Daniel told RCMP he was running errands, that he was simply driving to clear his head. But the pattern his vehicle created, darting back and forth, looping across town, disappearing and reappearing on camera, looks far less like someone on an errand, and far more like someone deliberately buying time. And then there's the missing 45 minutes. In that window between his phone going offline and then suddenly coming back online, no one can verify his movements. No one can confirm his story. And in cases like this, silence is often the loudest alarm bell of all. But RCMP's timeline doesn't stop there. By 2:30 p.m., Daniel's phone is pinging again, this time miles away from the Sullivan home. By then Lilly and Jack are already gone. Vanished. In a matter of hours, 2 children disappeared without a trace, and the man who last saw them has a timeline full of blackouts, contradictions, and unexplained detours. Witness statements complicate things even further. One neighbor recalls seeing Daniel's truck parked at an unusual angle near the tree line behind the Sullivan property. Another insists they heard shouting, a man's voice and the sound of children, sometime around 12:45 p.m., precisely during the period when Daniel's phone was off the grid. And then there's Logan, a key witness whose recent statement has added a chilling new layer. Logan told investigators that he not only saw Daniel that afternoon, but also heard something in the woods that still haunts him. He described it as sharp, urgent, and unmistakably human, the kind of sound that doesn't fade from your memory. This account, when placed against RCMP's newly confirmed timeline, paints a deeply unsettling picture. If Daniel's phone was off, his car seen circling, and witnesses heard voices in the woods, then the question becomes clear. Was that silent 45 minutes the very window when everything went wrong? The contradictions don't end there. Investigators have noted that Daniel's story about his movements has shifted over time. At first, he claimed he never left the property. Later, he admitted to short drives. Now, with RCMP confirming his exact movements, those drives were neither short nor simple. They were erratic, inconsistent, and in the eyes of many, deliberate. The public has been quick to react. Online forums are ablaze with theories. Some believe Daniel used that blackout period to stage a cover-up. Others argue he may not have acted alone, that someone else could have been with him, aiding or directing his movements. And then there are those who believe Daniel's behavior, while suspicious, doesn't necessarily prove guilt, pointing out that stress, panic, and confusion can make people act in ways that appear incriminating even if they're not. Yet the timeline remains the timeline. Phones don't lie. Cameras don't fabricate routes. And witnesses, despite memory gaps, tend to remember the things that disturb them most. In this case, all three, digital evidence, surveillance, and eyewitness accounts, converge to highlight the same person, the same hours, and the same chilling silence. And that silence is where investigators are now focusing their efforts. Because in missing persons cases, time is everything. Every minute lost is a lead gone cold. Every gap in a timeline is a doorway to speculation. And every contradiction from a potential suspect becomes a weight that either pulls the truth closer or buries it deeper. So what does this mean for Lilly and Jack Sullivan? It means the story isn't over. Far from it. RCMP's confirmation of Daniel Martel's movements is not closure. It's not the final word. It's an opening, one that could finally break the case wide open. Because now the questions are sharper, the contradictions more obvious, and the public pressure heavier than ever. Will RCMP act on these revelations? Will Daniel Martel finally face direct charges, or will investigators continue to hold back, waiting for one final piece of undeniable evidence? And if that evidence never comes, what then? Do we accept silence as the only answer? For the families, for the community, and for everyone who has followed this case from the beginning, the hope remains that the truth will not stay hidden forever. But hope alone won't solve it. What will solve it are facts. Facts that cut through silence, facts that confront contradictions, facts that lead to accountability. Because one thing is certain, the exact movements of Daniel Martel in the hours before Lilly and Jack vanished have been revealed. And they are not the movements of a man with nothing to hide. So as this investigation pushes forward, we are left with one haunting reality. The silence of those missing 45 minutes still speaks louder than anything Daniel Martel has ever said. And until those minutes are explained, the mystery of Lilly and Jack Sullivan will remain one of the darkest, most disturbing puzzles in recent memory. For weeks, speculation has filled the silence. The disappearance of Lilly and Jack Sullivan has left an entire community paralyzed with grief, fear, and unanswered questions. But behind the scenes, while the public clung to rumors and whispers, investigators were piecing together a timeline, Daniel Martel's final hours before the children vanished. Every phone ping, every camera sighting, every witness statement has been dissected, cross-checked, and lined up against his own words. And now, for the first time, the truth about where he was, who he spoke to, and what he did is finally beginning to surface. But even with all these details, there is one part of the puzzle that refuses to fit. A gap. A missing 45 minutes. A window of time that no one can account for, and that very well may hold the key to this entire case. According to RCMP records, Martel's phone activity tells a haunting story. At 12:15 p.m., his phone suddenly goes dark. No calls, no texts, no location data. For nearly an hour, he vanishes from the digital grid. And then, just as abruptly, at 1:03 p.m., his phone pings back to life, this time, right near the Sullivan home. That blackout, that missing stretch of time, has haunted investigators since day one. What was Martel doing? Where was he? And why does that silence align so closely with the time frame in which Lilly and Jack were last known to be safe? Witnesses have offered conflicting accounts. Some place Martel near McPherson's Lake during that missing window, a desolate spot with dense woods and countless hiding places. Others insist they saw him back at the Sullivan house, almost as if nothing had happened. The contradictions have made the truth feel slippery, always just out of reach. But then came something no one expected, the words of a local witness named Logan. Logan stepped forward with a statement that has changed everything. He claims that on the night of May 7th, just hours before the children were reported missing, he saw Daniel Martel outside. Not in the house, not tucked away with his partner, but outside, restless, pacing and smoking near the tree-line. Logan insists he heard children's voices echoing faintly in the distance. And then, just minutes later, he saw headlights. A second vehicle, briefly lighting up the gravel road before disappearing toward the lake. This detail directly collides with Martel's alibi. He told RCMP that during those crucial hours, he was inside with Malihia Brooks Murray, never leaving her side. But Logan's words paint a different picture. If Martel was outside, if he was connected to a second vehicle, why would he lie? What was he hiding? Investigators have not confirmed Logan's account publicly, but chatter behind the scenes suggests they are taking it seriously. RCMP has reportedly checked vehicle sightings in the area, canvassing for security footage that could match Logan's description. And that silence from official channels, that refusal to rule him out, speaks volumes. If Logan's words hold weight, the implications are chilling. One possibility is that Martel was using that missing time to move or conceal evidence. The other is that someone else was involved. Someone in that second vehicle, someone who may have played a role in the disappearance. Either way, the timeline as the public knows it may no longer be accurate. Because if children's voices were truly heard near the woods that night, it suggests Lilly and Jack may have been alive longer than investigators have acknowledged. That revelation could unravel everything we thought we knew about when and how their fate was sealed. The missing 45 minutes grows darker the more it is examined. Was Martel working alone, frantically trying to cover his tracks? Or was this part of a coordinated effort, a secret shared between more than one person? And if that's the case, how deep does this conspiracy go? The RCMP has finally confirmed Martel's movements minute by minute, but the gaps in that timeline tell as much as the pings themselves. He was accounted for in the early afternoon. He was accounted for after 1:03 p.m. But that silence in between remains a shadow, a void filled only by suspicion and dread. For the families, for the community, this revelation is both progress and torment. Progress because at last, the vague outlines of that day are taking shape. Torment because every new detail only raises darker questions. If Martel lied about where he was, what else has he lied about? If a second vehicle was there, who was driving it? And most painfully of all, if children's voices were heard that night, why didn't anyone reach them in time? The truth is coming into focus, but like a photograph half developed, it's blurry, incomplete, and haunting. The missing 45 minutes remain the dark heart of this case. And until that silence is broken, the fate of Lilly and Jack will remain locked inside it. So, the question is this: will RCMP finally act on the testimony of witnesses like Logan? Or will his words be dismissed as just another fragment in a case already tangled in secrets, lies, and unanswered questions? Because the answers exist. They're out there, buried somewhere in those 45 minutes. The only question is whether investigators and the public are ready to confront what those answers might reveal. At 11:12 a.m., surveillance from a neighboring property captures Martel's truck parked along a dirt pull-off near McPherson's Lake. The timestamp is verified, but there's no footage of him stepping out, only the stillness of the vehicle before it disappears minutes later. Investigators believe this was the beginning of a window that has haunted this case ever since. By 12:15 p.m., Martel's phone goes completely dark. No calls, no texts, no data. 4:48 long minutes, it's as if he vanished off the grid. Then, at exactly 1:03 p.m., the silence breaks. His phone reconnects, this time pinging off a tower less than half a mile from the Sullivan home. By 1:12 p.m., it registers another signal, consistent with him driving toward the property. This sequence has become the backbone of the timeline, a timeline that investigators continue to press against every statement, every witness account, and every inconsistency in Martel's story. What makes this even more disturbing is the overlap with community reports. Around the same time Martel's phone blinked back to life, neighbors recall hearing raised voices near the treeline. One witness describes seeing smoke drifting up from behind the shed. Another insists they caught a glimpse of Martel pacing outside, restless, chain-smoking, looking over his shoulder as if waiting for someone. None of this lines up with what Martel later told RCMP, that he had been inside the house with Malihia Brooksmurray, watching TV and barely leaving the living room. And then comes the vehicle. Multiple accounts mention headlights cutting through the gravel road between 12:30 and 1 p.m., right in the middle of Martel's missing window. A car, unfamiliar to neighbors, was seen pulling off toward the lake road. No license plate, no clear description, just a flash of light in the fog of an already fractured timeline. If that second vehicle was real, who was inside it? And more importantly, why has Martel never once acknowledged it? By 2:07 p.m., Martel's truck is confirmed parked back at the Sullivan residence. A neighbor walking her dog saw him unloading something from the rear bed. She describes it as a tarp or blanket, folded, heavy-looking. Within an hour, Lilly and Jack would be reported missing. The troubling part is that this timeline isn't just a chain of ordinary movements. It's a sequence filled with silence, contradictions, and unexplained encounters. And every time investigators try to press Martel for clarity, his answers fall apart. He claims he never left the house. Yet his phone, his vehicle, and now multiple witnesses all say otherwise. So the question becomes, what happened in those missing 45 minutes? Was Martel meeting someone by the lake? Was he hiding evidence? Or was he moving the children themselves before the official call of their disappearance ever reached RCMP? This reconstructed timeline isn't just detail. It's the map of a crime, one step at a time, narrowing in on the truth Martel refuses to admit. And if RCMP truly has confirmed this sequence beyond doubt, then the clock is ticking on how much longer Martel can hide behind silence. By 12:15 p.m., Daniel Martel's phone connects briefly to a tower near McPherson's Lake, just 3 kilometers from a wooded trail that RCMP would later swarm with search teams, cadaver dogs, and forensic units. That single ping stands out, not because it proved much at the time, but because of what happened next. At exactly 12:16 p.m., the device goes completely dark. No calls, no texts, no data usage. 4:47 long minutes, it's as if Martel and his phone simply vanished into thin air. And then, silence. That silence is chilling because in the digital age, people rarely go completely offline unless they want to. Phones die, sure. Signals drop, sometimes. But investigators have pointed out that Daniel's battery wasn't low. His phone didn't just lose service. It was deliberately turned off or placed somewhere without access. An intentional move, not an accident. At 1:03 p.m., the phone flickers back to life, this time pinging a tower closer to the Sullivan home. In those missing 47 minutes, Martel could have gone anywhere. He could have hidden something. He could have met someone. He could have moved the children. That void, that gap of time, has become the black hole at the center of this case. Witnesses later came forward saying they saw his vehicle near McPherson's Lake. Others claimed they spotted him walking along a tree line not far from the gravel road. And then, of course, there's Logan, the neighbor whose statement suggests Daniel wasn't alone during those hours. He describes voices in the dark, headlights from a second vehicle, and Martel pacing restlessly before vanishing into the woods. When investigators retraced Martel's steps, the 12:15 p.m. ping at McPherson's Lake took on new weight. It placed him dangerously close to the water, dangerously close to the wooded area that became ground zero for the search. And yet, RCMP have never confirmed what, if anything, they found there. So the question hangs heavy, what really happened in that window of silence? Because the timing is too precise, the gap too deliberate, and the location too suspicious for it to mean nothing. That 47-minute void may not just be a gap in a phone record. It could be the very moment where the truth about Lilly and Jack slipped into the shadows. 2 witnesses, both longtime locals who knew the land, the lake, and the silence of that community, told RCMP something they couldn't ignore. Around 12:40 p.m., they spotted a man who looked exactly like Daniel Martel. He wasn't just passing by on the road. He was lingering, standing close to the tree line by McPherson's Lake. His truck pulled off on the gravel shoulder, angled in a way that looked rushed, careless. They said it was unusual. This wasn't a place people stopped unless they knew it well. Their accounts came separately, without influence, yet both descriptions lined up. Same man, same clothing, same location, same time frame. But there was one enormous problem. Martel had already told investigators that by 12:40, he was back at the Sullivan home. He claimed he had returned early, making calls, preparing for the afternoon. His phone log supported him partially. It reconnected to a tower near the Sullivan residence at 1:03 p.m. But between 12:15 and 1:03, there is a silence. A dead zone. That missing 45 minutes that the RCMP now believes may be the single most critical gap in this entire case. Because that 45 minutes isn't just empty time. It's time that witnesses placed him somewhere else entirely. And what one of those witnesses claimed to have heard changes everything. The man was a fisherman, someone locals described as reliable, the type of person who doesn't embellish. He told RCMP that while packing his gear, he heard voices. At first, faint laughter. The sound of children, carefree, almost playful. But then in an instant, the mood shifted. The laughter turned into cries. What he described as panicked shouting. Distressed. And then silence. He said it stopped him in his tracks. It made no sense. There were no families picnicking there that day. No children in that part of the woods. He was certain of it. In all his years by that lake, he had never once heard children playing in that thick patch of forest. And yet, on that day at that time, he swore he heard them. He relayed his statement carefully. He wasn't sure if it was Lilly and Jack. He couldn't see them. But the voices, he said, didn't belong there. When investigators wrote it into the file, everything changed. RCMP never confirmed it publicly. They didn't announce it at press conferences. They didn't let it slip into official updates. But behind the scenes, the shift was visible. Search teams refocused on that exact stretch of forest. The grids expanded. 9 units were deployed. And for several days, McPherson's Lake became the hidden heart of the investigation. The RCMP may not have admitted it to the public, but that fisherman's words carried weight. Because if the voices were real, if the timing aligned, and if Daniel Martel truly was the man those 2 witnesses saw standing at the treeline, then the implications are chilling. It would mean that Lilly and Jack were alive in that window. That they were taken, transported, or led into those woods. That Martel story, his alibi of being home by 12:40, was a deliberate lie. It would unravel his entire narrative. The silence between 12:15 and 1:03 p.m. becomes more than just a gap. It becomes the void where everything happened. A void filled by only fragments. A sighting of Martel, the sound of children's voices, and then nothing. That missing 45 minutes is no longer just a hole in the timeline. It's the black box of this case. The place where the truth is buried. Think about it. Martel leaves the Sullivan home in the morning. He's seen buying coffee at 8:17. He heads east toward Route 316 just after 10 a.m., supposedly to pick up supplies. But he never arrives at the store. By 12:15, his phone pings near McPherson's Lake, only 3 kilometers from a wooded trail later combed by search teams. And then he disappears. His phone goes dark. When it comes back online at 1:03 p.m., it's near the Sullivan home. He tells police he was there the whole time. But 2 people say otherwise. This isn't speculation. These aren't rumors. These are sworn witness statements. The kind that investigators take seriously because they come from people who know their land, who know their roads, who know when something feels wrong. The chilling detail is this. If children's voices really were heard at 12:40, then it means Lilly and Jack were still alive. They were within reach. They hadn't vanished into thin air yet. They were in those woods. And Daniel Martel may have been with them. It reframes the entire investigation. Because suddenly, we're not just asking, where did he go during those 45 minutes? We're asking, what happened in those woods that made the voices stop? Some believe the children may have tried to run, their cries carrying into the trees. Others wonder if Martel panicked when someone noticed him parked near the treeline. Did he hear the fisherman moving his gear and realize the risk? Did that brief sound of children echoing from the woods mark the moment everything turned? The RCMP has the pieces. The phone data. The vehicle movements. The witness statements. They've followed up with hours of interviews, searching for cracks in Martel's alibi. And though they remain tight-lipped publicly, the very fact that these details have entered the official file suggests investigators see them as more than coincidence. Because coincidences don't leave a 45-minute void in a timeline. Coincidences don't explain why Martel lied about being home when 2 people saw him elsewhere. Coincidences don't carry the sound of children crying from a place they should never have been. The silence after 12:40 is deafening. And now, the case stands on that silence. Will RCMP act? Will they treat the witness accounts as the breakthrough, the missing thread that ties the entire story together? Or will it become just another piece of evidence lost in a sea of secrets, lies, and contradictions? For weeks, the community has waited for a resolution, clinging to every update, every search, every confirmation. But this may be the closest thing we have to the truth. A man seen near the woods. Children's voices in the distance. A gap in time that no one can explain. And a question that refuses to fade. If this really was the moment everything happened, why hasn't Daniel Martel been held accountable? Investigators have now confirmed that during their intensive search near McPherson's Lake, items were recovered that may change the course of this investigation forever. Among those items was a small piece of fabric, torn, dirty, and weathered by the elements, that, according to sources close to the case, appears to match the distinct pink color of Lilly Sullivan's blanket. That blanket had been reported missing from the Sullivan home at the same time the children disappeared, a detail that immediately connects the discovery to the timeline investigators have been building. Forensic testing is still underway, and RCMP has not released the full results. But even the suggestion that this fabric might belong to Lilly's blanket raises chilling questions. Why was it there, 3 kilometers away from the home, tucked near a trail Daniel Martel never mentioned in his statement? Why was there no acknowledgement of this location, no explanation of what he might have been doing there, or why his phone suddenly dropped offline for nearly an hour? That 1-hour blackout has become the dark heart of this timeline. Up until 12:15 p.m. on May 7th, the data paints a fairly consistent picture. Martel's phone pings near McPherson's Lake, confirming his presence in the area. But from that moment, there's nothing. No calls. No texts. No data use. The man who had been constantly connected, scrolling, messaging, and checking apps earlier that morning, suddenly vanishes from the digital grid. And it's during this precise window that witnesses place a man matching his description along the tree line. At 12:40 p.m., a local resident swears he saw Martel, alone, restless, pacing near the edge of the woods. Another resident claims to have heard children's voices echoing faintly through the trees. RCMP has never confirmed those details publicly, but their inclusion in official files suggests that the statements were not dismissed. They are, at the very least, being weighed against the rest of the evidence. When Martel's phone finally reconnects, at 1:03 p.m., it does so near the Sullivan home. By 1:12 p.m., his digital footprint places him firmly back in the area he claimed to be in all along. But what happened between 12:15 and 1:03 p.m. remains unanswered. Was he with the children during this blackout? Was someone else involved? Perhaps the driver of that mysterious second vehicle spotted by Logan near the Lake Road later that night? The discovery of Lilly's blanket fragment only intensifies those questions. Items like clothing or blankets don't move themselves. If it was found at McPherson's Lake, it means someone had to bring it there. Was this the site of an exchange, a meeting, or something far darker? Was it an attempt to hide evidence in a place Daniel thought police would never look? Every piece of this puzzle pushes investigators closer to the chilling possibility that the story Daniel Martel told RCMP simply does not align with reality. If he was with Malihia Brooks-Murray inside the house as he claims, how do we explain the sightings? If he never left the property, how do we explain the blanket? And perhaps most importantly, why has he consistently denied being in the exact area where RCMP just made this discovery? The forensic results from that pink fabric will be critical. If DNA confirms it belonged to Lilly, it won't just poke holes in Martel's story, it will blow it wide open. It could place him, or at the very least the children, at McPherson's Lake during those missing minutes. And that revelation would shift the entire timeline of the case. So here's where things stand. Investigators now have digital data showing Martel's movements, eyewitness accounts contradicting his story, and a physical item linked to Lilly found in an area he never mentioned. Add to that the eerie silence of his phone during the most crucial hour, and you begin to see why RCMP is tightening its focus. The clock on May 7th doesn't lie. Martel's story does. If the children's voices were truly heard in those woods, then the nightmare didn't begin when they were reported missing. It began earlier, hidden in that blackout hour by the lake. And the question that now haunts this investigation is simple. What was Daniel Martel really doing between 12:15 and 1:03 p.m.? Because somewhere in that missing 45 minutes lies the truth about what happened to Lilly and Jack Sullivan. From 12:15 p.m. to 1:02 p.m., nothing. No phone activity. No sightings. No receipts. Just an empty void in the timeline. This is where the theories begin. That 47-minute stretch has become the single most scrutinized gap in Daniel Martel's day. Because in investigations like this, silence is rarely innocent. It almost always means movement, the kind of movement you don't want tracked. The concealment theory is perhaps the most chilling. It suggests Daniel used this exact window of time to hide evidence or move the children. The location near McPherson's lake wasn't random. Locals know it well. Thick woods, steep trails, and isolated clearings where you could disappear from sight in seconds. If Daniel was there, and if investigators later found a piece of fabric consistent with Lilly's blanket, then the possibility arises that he brought them here. Not as part of a casual walk or trip, but as part of something darker. Something deliberate. Concealment is a theory that implies planning, not a sudden panic, not a mistake, but an action designed to erase traces. Then there's the meeting theory. This one is even harder to ignore because of Logan's statement. Logan insists he saw Daniel outside that afternoon, standing near a second vehicle. If that's true, then Daniel wasn't alone. He wasn't where he claimed to be. He may have been meeting someone else, someone whose role in this case hasn't been publicly named. The question then becomes, who was in that second vehicle, and why hasn't RCMP disclosed whether they've identified it? In cases like this, meetings in secluded places often mean transfer. Whether that transfer involved items, evidence, or, unthinkably, the children themselves, is a chilling prospect. The staging theory is the third possibility. It suggests Daniel used that missing 45 minutes to return to the Sullivan home and alter the scene before anyone else arrived. Perhaps to make it appear as though the children had simply wandered off. Staging isn't unusual in criminal cases. Suspects often attempt to build a narrative for investigators before they're even asked a single question. If Daniel truly was back at the house during this time, why do witnesses place him elsewhere? Why does the phone data contradict his own words? A staged scene is one of the hardest things for law enforcement to untangle because it is designed to manipulate both the timeline and perception. Each of these theories is terrifying in its own right. But all three share a common thread. None of them align with Daniel's statement. He told RCMP he was inside with Malihia Brooks-Murray during those hours. If Logan is correct, if the witnesses are correct, if the evidence near McPherson's lake is what investigators suspect, then Daniel's alibi collapses. And when an alibi collapses, so does the defense around it. That's why this gap matters. Because in high-stakes investigations, time doesn't lie. Phones don't lie. Witnesses may be mistaken, but when multiple accounts align, when digital evidence supports them, and when physical objects are recovered in the very place the suspect refuses to admit being, silence becomes louder than words. So the questions multiply. Was Daniel alone in that 45-minute window, acting out of desperation? Or was he part of something larger, with another vehicle, another person, and another layer of deception? And the children's voices. That haunting detail from the witness near McPherson's lake, swearing they heard Lilly and Jack in the treeline. RCMP won't confirm it. They may never confirm it. But it lingers in the air like an echo. If those voices were real, then the official timeline of the disappearance is wrong. It means the children were alive longer than the public was led to believe. It means Daniel's version of events isn't just incomplete, it may be entirely false. Every theory leads back to that same dark gap in the timeline. 47 minutes where two children's lives could have been decided. 47 minutes where Daniel Martel could have been anywhere, doing anything. 47 minutes that hold the answers the RCMP, the families, and the entire community have been searching for. At 12:15 p.m., Daniel Martel's phone pings a tower near McPherson's lake. Just 3 kilometers from a heavily wooded trail later searched by RCMP. It's a rural area, sparsely traveled, quiet, The kind of place where footsteps fade quickly into the brush and the sound of children's voices can vanish into the wind. And then, silence. From 12:15 to 1:02 p.m., nothing. No phone data. No calls. No receipts. No sightings. Just an empty void carved into the timeline, a missing 47 minutes that investigators and the community cannot explain. It's in this silence that the darkest theories begin to live. Some call it the concealment window, the idea that Daniel used this time to move evidence, hide belongings, or even relocate the children themselves. Others whisper about the meeting theory, that he wasn't alone at all, that someone else was waiting for him in those woods, someone who knew what was happening, someone who might have been involved. And then there's the staging theory, that in those silent minutes, Daniel wasn't running from the truth but preparing it, altering scenes, arranging alibis, making sure what came next would look a certain way. And while speculation can twist endlessly, the hard fact is this. Investigators later confirmed they recovered items from that very area, including a small piece of fabric, nearly identical in color to Lilly's blanket. Testing is ongoing, but it's enough to raise one chilling question. Why did Daniel never mention McPherson's lake in his statement? Because if his story is complete, if nothing sinister happened in that lost hour, then why does the land itself tell a different story? Two witnesses step forward. Both locals. Both certain of what they saw. Around 12:40 p.m., they describe a man who looks exactly like Daniel, walking along the tree line. But that's not the part that shakes investigators. One of them swears under oath, that they heard children's voices drifting from the woods. Now, RCMP hasn't publicly confirmed this detail. They've kept it carefully sealed behind the official record. But the account is real. It's in the file. And if it's true, it means Daniel's version of events, that he was back at the Sullivan home by that time, is a lie. Because in the raw math of the timeline, he cannot be in two places at once. Then, as if on cue, the silence shatters. At 1:03 p.m., Daniel's phone blinks back online. After nearly an hour of deliberate darkness, the signal returns. And not near the woods, not near McPherson's lake, but back by the Sullivan property. Investigators call it a reappearance of data, as though someone flipped a switch, as though the story needed to resume exactly where he wanted it to. Just 9 minutes later, at 1:12 p.m., a neighbor's camera captures him outside. He isn't relaxed. He isn't composed. He's pacing, sharp, restless movements, a cigarette pressed between his fingers. He smokes, walks, turns, smokes again. To an untrained eye, it might look like nervous energy. But to investigators, it looks like calculation. A man standing in his yard, replaying events in his head, wondering if every piece of the puzzle is where it needs to be. And then comes 1:40 p.m. The second camera. Another frozen frame. This time, it's Malihia Brooks Murray, the children's mother. She's seen leaving the Sullivan home in a separate vehicle. There's no hesitation. No wave goodbye. No glance at Daniel still outside. She simply gets in and drives off. This, right here, is the final confirmed footage investigators have released to the public. After 1:40 p.m., the timeline stops. The video evidence ends. The trail doesn't just go cold, it disappears. And what follows is not clarity, not closure, but silence. The silence of missing data. The silence of unanswered questions. The silence of two children whose voices were last claimed to be heard in the trees. So what do we do with this silence? Do we believe the timeline is incomplete, deliberately left vague by investigators holding back key evidence? Or do we believe Daniel and Malihia, who insist their actions that day were nothing more than ordinary moments now buried under extraordinary suspicion? Because when you strip everything away, the interviews, the tips, the speculation, what remains are those missing 47 minutes. A black hole in time where anything could have happened, and perhaps everything did. It's why the concealment theory won't die. It's why the meeting theory refuses to fade. It's why the staging theory feels, to many, too sharp to ignore. And yet, RCMP holds the real answers. They've logged 488 tips. They've reviewed hundreds of hours of surveillance. They've conducted interviews, polygraphs, forensic digs. And still, they stopped the official timeline at 1:40 p.m. A deliberate ending. A silence they choose not to break. Which leaves us here, circling questions with no safe landing. Was Daniel truly in the woods that day, his phone turned off to mask his movements? Was he alone? Did Malihia's departure at 1:40 mark something more than just coincidence? The pacing, the fabric, the blanket, the silence. Each detail feels like a whisper, a breadcrumb left in the dark. But together they create a picture no one wants to see. A picture where two children walk into the timeline and never walk out. So maybe the more haunting truth is this. It isn't just Daniel's silence that lingers after 1:40. It's ours too. The silence of communities waiting for answers. The silence of voices lost too soon. The silence of a case that feels as though it's teetering on the edge of revelation, but never quite tips over. And until it does, that final timestamp will haunt everything. 1:40 p.m. The last confirmed sighting. The last time the trail is solid. The last moment before the story collapses into the unknown. Because the truth isn't just buried in the woods, or in the files RCMP won't release. The truth is buried in the silence. And it lingers. It lingers with every unanswered question. It lingers with every theory whispered online. It lingers with every parent who looks at their child and wonders how something like this could happen. And most of all, it lingers with the names. Lilly. Two children whose story pauses at 1:40 p.m. Two voices swallowed by silence. And two questions that refuse to fade. What really happened that day? And why hasn't the silence been broken? We now know Daniel Martel's final hours before Lilly and Jack vanished. The RCMP timeline is clearer than it's ever been. His movements tracked, his phone activity mapped, his steps scrutinized minute by minute. From the early hours of the morning to the tense silence that fell just after midday, the picture is almost complete. Almost. Because despite all this detail, despite every ping, every sighting, every witness account, there is one thing that continues to haunt this investigation. A gap. A void. A missing 45 minutes that refuses to explain itself. From 12:15 p.m. to 1:02 p.m., Daniel Martel disappears. His phone goes dark. His car isn't seen. No neighbor remembers him walking by. No store clerk recalls him stopping in. Nothing. For nearly an hour, Daniel Martel ceases to exist in the eyes of investigators. And when he reappears, the children are already gone. That silence, that single gap in time, has become the dark heart of this case. Investigators have thrown out multiple theories to explain it. The concealment theory, that Daniel used this window to hide evidence or move the children to a location that would buy him time. The meeting theory, that he wasn't alone, that he met with someone else, an accomplice, an enabler, a second player in a plan larger than anyone suspected. The staging theory, that he rushed back to alter the scene, creating a narrative that would later protect him from suspicion. But theories, no matter how compelling, do not solve a case. The RCMP has confirmed items were recovered near McPherson's Lake, a location Martel never mentioned. They've acknowledged witnesses who claim they saw him when he swore he was elsewhere. They've logged every inconsistency in his timeline, every contradiction in his statements, every shadow that falls across his story. Still, there have been no charges. So we're left with the question no one wants to say out loud. Do investigators already have enough to bring Daniel Martel in? Or are they holding back, waiting, forensics in hand, witness statements stacked, timelines pieced together, for that one final piece of evidence that will close the gap forever? Because here's the thing. Police don't need to prove what happened in every detail. They only need enough to convince a jury that Daniel Martel was responsible. And with every new revelation, every new confirmation from the RCMP, it feels like that line is getting closer. But maybe the hesitation isn't about evidence. Maybe it's about certainty. Maybe investigators know that once they move, once they arrest, once they charge, once they declare Daniel Martel the prime suspect, there's no going back. The world will know. The case will shift. And if they've miscalculated, if they've left a stone unturned, if they've underestimated the complexity of that missing 45 minutes, justice for Lilly and Jack could be lost forever. That is the weight of this silence. That is the power of a gap in time. For the families, for the community, for everyone who has followed this case, it is an agonizing weight. They know the truth is out there. They know the timeline is almost complete. They know Daniel Martel's story doesn't add up. But until the RCMP decides to act, all they can do is watch and wonder. So I'll ask you, the ones listening, the ones who care, the ones who refuse to let these children's names fade into silence. Do you believe the RCMP already has enough to charge Daniel Martel? Or are they waiting, holding everything back, until that one last piece of evidence finally breaks the silence of those missing 45 minutes? Because until then, the question remains. And the dark heart of this case beats on.